The rain began before the first gunshot. Olivia Carter barely noticed either. She was kneeling on the concrete floor of her small veterinary clinic just outside Ashwood, Illinois, trying to calm a terrified German shepherd, trembling beneath the examination table. "Easy, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing wet fur away from the dog's frightened eyes. Outside, thunder rolled across the countryside. Inside, everything smelled of antiseptic, wet earth, and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Her assistant had already left for the evening. The waiting room was empty. It was supposed to be another quiet Tuesday. Then the clinic lights flickered. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Then another and another. Olivia frowned. By the time she looked through the rain-speckled window, nearly 20 luxury SUVs had surrounded the building in perfect formation. Engines idled. Doors remained closed. Every instinct she possessed told her something was terribly wrong. A slow knock echoed against the glass entrance. Not hurried, not aggressive. 3 calm knocks. She approached carefully. Standing outside was the tallest man she had ever seen. His black suit was soaked by the storm. Blood mixed with rain as it streamed from a wound near his shoulder. Behind him, dozens of armed men waited silently beside the SUVs. No one moved without watching him first. He looked exhausted, dangerous, unbelievably composed. When their eyes met, the world seemed to fall silent. His gray gaze held hers for several long seconds. Not with desire, not with curiosity. Recognition. Olivia frowned. "I think you've mistaken this place," she said through the glass. His voice came softly. "No, I've finally found it. Minutes earlier, Chicago, 40 miles away. Luxury chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors inside Romano Tower. More than 200 guests filled the ballroom. Models, heiresses, political families, business magnates. Every woman there had been introduced as a possible bride for Luca Romano. None of them interested him. Massimo De Santis smiled from across the room. "You've rejected 37 women." Luca adjusted the cuff of his black suit without looking at him. "I stopped counting." Massimo laughed. "You'll have to marry eventually." Luca finally looked up. "I already have someone." The music stopped. Every conversation died instantly. Massimo blinked. "You what?" Luca removed a folded photograph from his inside pocket. A woman smiled awkwardly beside a large golden retriever. She wore muddy boots. Her brown hair escaped a loose ponytail. Her cheeks were flushed from working outdoors. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't famous. She wasn't even dressed for the camera. She was simply laughing. Massimo stared. "Who is she?" Luca answered without hesitation. "My future wife." Back in Ashwood, Olivia unlocked the clinic door. The stranger stepped inside without waiting for permission. Rainwater dripped onto the floor. He glanced around the tiny reception area. Family photographs, dog calendars, children's drawings taped behind the counter. A life untouched by violence. For a brief moment, his expression softened. "You still kept this place." Olivia frowned again. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" He smiled, almost imperceptibly. "No, but you saved my life." She blinked. "I think I'd remember that." "You wouldn't." He turned toward the examination room. A frightened horse whinnied from the recovery stall. Luca froze. His breathing changed. Slowly, he walked toward the animal. The massive black stallion lifted its head. For the first time in years, the animal stepped forward willingly. Olivia's eyes widened. Midnight? The horse nuzzled Luca's shoulder. She stared between them. You know him? Luca gently rested his forehead against the stallion. I owe him everything. Olivia laughed nervously. That's impossible. I've treated Midnight for almost 6 years. Luca finally turned. And 7 years ago, you kept him alive after someone tried to poison him. Her smile disappeared. Memory returned in fragments. A freezing winter morning. An unconscious horse abandoned outside town. No identification. No owner. She had worked for nearly 18 hours without stopping. She never asked where the horse came from. She simply refused to let him die. She whispered, "That was your horse?" Luca nodded once. The only witness who couldn't betray me. Outside, one of the SUVs exploded. Glass shattered across the parking lot. Machine gun fire erupted through the rain. Olivia screamed. Luca moved before the sound reached her. His arm wrapped around her shoulders. He pushed her to the floor. Bullets tore through the clinic windows. Every light exploded. His body covered hers completely. The world became glass, smoke, and thunder. She felt him flinch. Warm blood soaked through his jacket. Luca, stay down. His voice remained perfectly calm, as if bullets were nothing more than rain. More gunfire. Then, silence. The clinic door burst open. 5 armed men rushed inside. Boss, the DeSantis convoy found us. Luca didn't move away from Olivia. Instead, he kept one hand over the back of her head, shielding her from the broken glass scattered across the floor. One of his men hesitated. Boss, the doctor is frightened. Luca looked down. Olivia's hands were shaking uncontrollably. Without thinking, she reached for the wound in his shoulder. You need stitches. His men exchanged stunned glances. Nobody had spoken to Luca Romano like an ordinary patient in over a decade. He studied her trembling fingers. Even now, after seeing armed men, explosions, and enough weapons to start a war, her first instinct wasn't to run. It was to treat his injuries. Something inside Luca shifted, almost imperceptibly, dangerously. Massimo had once warned every crime family in America that Luca Romano had only one weakness. He had none. Standing in the ruined clinic, watching Olivia ignore the gunfire while pressing a towel against his bleeding shoulder, Luca realized that statement had just become a lie. And somewhere beyond the shattered windows, hidden in the darkness, a sniper watched through the scope of a rifle. The crosshairs settled, not on Luca Romano, but on Olivia Carter. The red dot appeared first. It danced across the shattered tile floor before climbing slowly up Olivia's white lab coat. Luca saw it instantly. His expression didn't change, only his eyes hardened. Get down. Olivia barely had time to breathe before Luca wrapped one arm around her waist and pulled her behind the steel examination table. The rifle cracked. The window exploded inward. Glass rained across the clinic. The bullet buried itself deep inside the wall, exactly where Olivia had been standing a heartbeat earlier. Every man inside the room reached for his weapon. Luca didn't. He was already looking toward the rooftop, nearly 400 yards away. North Grain elevator, he said calmly. His security chief, Enzo, spoke into his radio. Sniper confirmed. Team 3, move. Within seconds, black-clad operatives disappeared into the storm. Olivia's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She looked at Luca. He hadn't let go of her. His body still shielded hers completely. Rainwater dripped from his dark hair onto her shoulder. She could smell gunpowder, expensive cologne, and blood. Too much blood. You've lost a lot, she whispered. I'm fine. No. She grabbed his wrist before he could pull away. You're bleeding through the bandage. No one touched Luca Romano without permission. Not politicians. Not rival bosses. Not even members of his own family. Yet Olivia held his wrist with surprising firmness. Sit down, Enzo stuttered. The other guards exchanged uncertain glances. No one ordered Luca Romano to do anything. For several long seconds, silence. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Luca sat. Olivia cut away the ruined fabric of his tailored jacket. The expensive black wool fell onto the floor in pieces. One of the guards winced. That suit alone probably cost more than the clinic's monthly rent. Olivia didn't notice. She was focused on the wound. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, deep enough to require stitches, shallow enough that he'd ignored it. She cleaned the wound carefully. You should have gone to a hospital. I don't like hospitals. You don't have to like them. I don't trust them. She looked up. There's a difference. For the first time that night, a faint smile touched the corner of Luca's mouth, barely visible. Gone. Almost instantly. You talk to everyone like this? I talk to stubborn patients like this. Another pause. Then, so I'm a patient? You walked into my clinic, bleeding. She threaded the needle. That makes you one. Chicago. 2 hours later. News spread through the underworld faster than wildfire. The head of the Romano syndicate had been seen leaving a tiny veterinary clinic in rural Illinois. Worse, he hadn't left alone. Inside a candlelit dining room, Massimo De Santis crushed a crystal glass in his hand. A veterinarian? One of his advisors nodded. Small town clinic. Unmarried. 31. Massimo laughed bitterly. I offered him actresses. Silence. Models. Silence. Daughters of senators. Another pause. And he chooses. He slammed both hands against the table. A veterinarian? No one answered, because everyone in the room understood something terrifying. Luca Romano never made emotional decisions. If he had chosen this woman, there was a reason. Massimo's expression darkened. Fin here. One of the men hesitated. Alive? Massimo smiled. No. The storm finally eased just before dawn. Olivia stepped outside the damaged clinic, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. Black SUVs still surrounded the property. Armed guards stood watch in the rain. It looked less like a veterinary clinic now, and more like a military fortress. Luca stood alone near the fence, staring toward the tree line. His jacket had been replaced. His shoulder had not. You should be resting. I've rested enough. She handed him a coffee. He accepted it without looking away from the horizon. I don't understand. What? Why are all these people trying to kill you? He answered without emotion. Because I'm difficult to replace. She sighed. I was hoping for a less terrifying answer. It's the honest one. They stood together in silence. The wind carried the smell of wet pine and fresh earth. Olivia finally asked the question that had haunted her all night. Why me? Luca looked at her. Not around her. Not through her. At her. You really don't remember. Remember what? 7 years ago. He reached into his pocket. Inside was an old photograph, its edges worn from years of handling. It showed Olivia standing beside the enormous black stallion. Her face was smeared with dirt. Her hair was a mess. She was smiling proudly after saving the horse's life. On the back, written in faded ink, were 3 words: "Don't give up." Olivia frowned. I wrote that. You did. I leave notes with every difficult recovery. She smiled faintly. I guess I forgot. I didn't. His voice became quieter. Midnight wasn't just a horse. He carried evidence. What kind of evidence? The kind that could start a war. Her smile vanished. Luca continued. The poison wasn't meant for him. It was meant for me. Olivia stared. Someone had tried to assassinate him through a horse. It sounded absurd until she remembered how frightened the animal had been, how carefully someone had hidden him before abandoning him near her clinic. Luca's gaze drifted toward Midnight, grazing peacefully behind the stable. If he had died, I would have lost more than an animal. I would have lost proof. Proof of what? He didn't answer. Instead, his phone vibrated. Enzo approached immediately. Boss. Luca glanced at the screen. His expression became unreadable. What happened? Our warehouse on Navy Pier. Olivia watched their faces change. It's gone. 43 men. No one spoke. Enzo lowered his voice. They're all dead. The drive back to Chicago began an hour later. Olivia had insisted on checking Midnight one final time before leaving. She still couldn't believe she'd agreed to step inside one of the black SUVs. I'm only coming because you promised I'd return tomorrow. You have my word. I don't know if that's comforting. It should be. She looked out the window. Fields disappeared behind them. Then highways. Then skyscrapers. The closer they came to Chicago, the more police cars appeared. Helicopters circled overhead. Luxury towers pierced the gray morning sky. It felt like entering another world. Luca noticed her staring. First time? In this part of the city. You'll get used to it. I'm not planning to. His eyes lingered on her longer than necessary. You keep saying that. Because I have a life. A clinique. Patience. My neighbors. My friends. I'm not part of your world. His answer came quietly. Someone already decided you are. Romano Tower rose above downtown, like a fortress disguised as luxury. Private elevators, bulletproof glass, Italian marble, fresh orchids. Everything gleamed with impossible perfection. Olivia felt painfully out of place in her muddy boots. As the elevator doors opened, every employee stopped walking. Heads turned. Whispers spread instantly. Who's she? That's her. The veterinarian. The boss brought her here. Olivia lowered her eyes. She had spent years pretending not to notice whispers about her weight. This felt different. Not cruel. Curious. Suspicious. Dangerous. Luca stepped closer. Without touching her, he positioned himself between Olivia and everyone staring. One simple movement. Protective. Possessive. Deliberate. The whispers stopped immediately. Nobody looked at her again. Not because they suddenly respected her, because they feared him. Olivia looked sideways. You didn't have to do that. I know. Then why did you? His answer was almost inaudible. I don't like people looking at what's mine. The words hung between them, heavy, dangerous. Before Olivia could respond, the elevator doors opened again. An elegant woman in a crimson designer dress stood waiting. Beautiful, poised, perfect. She smiled at Luca. Then her eyes landed on Olivia. The smile disappeared. So, she said softly, this is the woman who embarrassed every powerful family in Chicago. Luca's expression turned to ice. Be careful what you say next, Bianca. Bianca ignored the warning. She looked Olivia up and down before letting out a quiet laugh. This is who you chose over queens? The hallway fell silent. Every guard froze. Every assistant stopped breathing. Olivia felt years of old humiliation pressing against her chest. Before she could speak, Luca took one slow step forward. His voice never rose. If you insult her again, he said, your family will spend the next decade rebuilding everything they lose tonight. Bianca's face drained of color. No one had ever heard Luca threaten a political ally over a woman. Not once. She realized, far too late, that Olivia Carter was no longer merely a guest. She had become the most dangerous person in Chicago to offend. Olivia looked at Luca, stunned. He still wasn't looking at her. He was watching everyone else, as if daring the entire city to test him. And somewhere inside Romano Tower, hidden behind a wall of surveillance monitors, an unknown observer quietly zoomed in on Olivia's face, then smiled. She's exactly where we wanted her. The monitor went black. The surveillance monitor went black. Only one man in the room smiled. Massimo De Santis leaned back in his leather chair, slowly rotating the silver ring on his finger as the final frame of Olivia Carter's face disappeared from the screen. So, he murmured, our impossible Luca Romano finally has a weakness. Around him, no one spoke. The silence wasn't respect. It was fear. Massimo had spent 15 years trying to understand the only man who had never bowed to him, negotiated with him, or accepted one of his carefully arranged alliances. Luca Romano never gambled, never drank, never chased women, never allowed emotions to interfere with business. Until now. Prepare the next phase, Massimo ordered. A young lieutenant hesitated. The veterinarian? Massimo's smile widened. No. He stood and walked toward the panoramic window overlooking Chicago's rain-soaked skyline. We don't kill the woman. He paused. We make Luca believe he failed to protect her. Meanwhile, Olivia had never felt so out of place. Romano Tower looked less like a corporate headquarters and more like a palace guarded by soldiers. Every hallway gleamed with polished marble. Original Renaissance paintings hung beneath soft golden lighting. Even the silence felt expensive. She followed Luca through the executive floor until he stopped outside a pair of dark oak doors. My office. He pushed them open. The room was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. A crackling fireplace warmed one side of the room, despite the summer rain outside. Ancient books lined one wall. Weapons beautifully crafted, historically significant, were displayed behind reinforced glass on another. Nothing inside the office felt excessive. Everything felt intentional. Olivia slowly turned in a circle. This doesn't look like a mafia office. It isn't. What is it? The only room where no one lies to me. Before she could respond, Midnight's leather bridle, resting on a display stand, caught her attention. She walked toward it instinctively. You kept it. Luca's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. I keep everything that matters. Olivia gently traced the worn leather. It healed beautifully. It almost didn't. She looked back at him. You really believe saving your horse changed everything? Luca crossed the room. No. He stopped beside her. I know it did. He reached into a locked drawer. Instead of documents, he removed a weathered envelope. Inside were dozens of photographs. Olivia frowned. Every picture showed Midnight during recovery. Bandages, changing, learning to stand again, running across a pasture. She smiled. You documented everything. I documented the reason he survived. Then he placed one final photograph on the desk. Olivia froze. It was her, covered in mud, exhausted after nearly 20 hours without sleep. She hadn't known anyone had taken the picture. When one of my men photographed the recovery. You've kept this? For 7 years. She looked up slowly. You've been watching me? No. His answer came instantly. I made sure you stayed alive. The distinction unsettled her more than she expected. That evening, Luca insisted she remain inside Romano Tower until the attack stopped. I have patience. They'll be cared for. My clinic has already been repaired. She blinked. What? I had contractors there before sunrise. You what? The broken windows are replaced. The roof has been repaired. The security system has been upgraded. My flower beds. He almost smiled. They replanted those too. Olivia stared. You rebuilt my clinic. Overnight? It was damaged because of me. She folded her arms. You don't solve every problem with money. No, I solve them with responsibility. She wanted to argue. Instead, she found herself speechless. Dinner arrived just after sunset. A long table, enough food for 20 people, only 2 place settings. Olivia laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. Luca sat across from her. I agree. Then why serve this much? My staff doesn't know how to cook for 2. She laughed again. A real laugh this time. It echoed softly through the enormous dining room. Several staff members exchanged surprised glances. No one could remember the last time laughter had been heard in Romano Tower. Luca noticed. He didn't comment, but something in his expression changed. For a brief second, the crushing loneliness behind his carefully controlled demeanor became visible. Olivia saw it, and for the first time, she stopped seeing only the feared Mafia Boss. She saw a man who had spent years eating dinner alone. Across the city, Massimo's men prepared their trap, not with guns, with cameras. By midnight, gossip websites exploded with breaking headlines. Mystery. Woman captures Luca Romano's heart. Who is the curvy stranger leaving Romano Tower? Chicago's most eligible billionaire rejects elite socialites for small-town veterinarian. Photographs filled every article. Some had clearly been taken with long-range lenses. Others could only have come from inside the tower. Massimo studied the headlines with satisfaction. Now she has nowhere to hide. Olivia woke before dawn. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Hundreds of missed calls. Messages from clients, friends, former classmates, reporters, even people she hadn't spoken to in years. One message stood out. You don't know me. Leave Chicago today if you want to live. No sender. No signature. Only those 11 words. She felt her stomach tighten. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Luca entered only after she answered. He immediately noticed her pale face. What happened? She silently handed him the phone. His eyes scanned the message once. Then his entire posture changed. Cold, focused, dangerously calm. Enzo. The security chief appeared almost instantly. No one enters or leaves this floor. Double every perimeter. Find whoever leaked her location. Enzo nodded. Yes, boss. Olivia looked at Luca. This is because of me. No, it's because of me. You should let me go home. I can't. I don't belong here. You stopped belonging to your old life the moment someone aimed a sniper rifle at you. She looked away. I didn't ask for this. His voice softened. I know. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. Then Olivia quietly asked, Does it ever stop? Luca understood what she meant. The danger, the constant vigilance, the loneliness. No. Then, how do you live with it? He looked toward the rain sliding down the glass. You stop calling it living. Those words struck Olivia harder than any confession could have, because they weren't spoken with self-pity. Only truth. Later that afternoon, Luca insisted on taking Midnight to the private training grounds outside the city. It's safer there. Olivia refused to let anyone else examine the horse. The convoy stretched for nearly half a mile. Black SUVs, motorcycles, armed escorts, helicopters overhead. It feels like we're transporting a president, Olivia muttered. Luca glanced at her. No, the president usually has less security. She rolled her eyes despite herself. You really do have an ego. No, I have enemies. The countryside was quiet, too quiet. Midnight grazed peacefully inside the enclosed paddock, while Olivia checked his leg. He looks perfect. He always calms down around you. She smiled, scratching the stallion's neck. Animals don't care what people look like. Luca watched her carefully. Neither do I, he thought, but he didn't say it. Not yet. Just then, Midnight jerked his head sharply, his ears pinned back. He snorted a warning. Olivia frowned. Something's wrong. Luca's instincts flared instantly. Everyone down. The explosion came a fraction of a second later. The far fence erupted into splintered wood and smoke. Gunfire ripped across the field. Horses screamed. Bodyguards scattered for cover. Without hesitation, Luca threw himself toward Olivia, wrapping both arms around her as they crashed into the muddy ground. Bullets hissed overhead. She could hear his heartbeat. Steady, controlled. Even now, he pressed her head against his chest. Don't move. What about Midnight? I'll save him. You'll be killed. His gray eyes locked onto hers. If I have to choose. He stopped. The words caught in his throat. For the first time in years, Luca Romano couldn't finish a sentence, because he had almost admitted the one thing he had sworn never to feel again. He had become terrified of losing Olivia Carter. And somewhere beyond the smoke, hidden behind a collapsed barn, a masked gunman lowered his rifle. Not because he had failed, but because seeing Luca protect Olivia had confirmed exactly what Massimo needed to know. The war was no longer about territory. It was about her. The rain returned just before midnight. Lightning split the sky above the abandoned Belmont Equestrian Estate, where generations of champions had once been trained. Tonight, the Grand Stables had become a battlefield. Floodlights illuminated rows of black SUVs. Hundreds of armed men stood in absolute silence. In the center of the courtyard, Olivia Carter was tied to an old wooden post beneath the shelter of the stable roof. Her wrists were bound, but her head remained high. Across from her stood Massimo De Santis. He adjusted his tailored overcoat as if he were attending an opera instead of orchestrating a war. "You know," he said calmly, "I spent 15 years trying to defeat Luca Romano." He smiled. "It turns out all I needed was you." Olivia refused to answer. Massimo stepped closer. "He'll come. He always protects what matters." She met his eyes. "You're wrong." His smile widened. "No, I've finally understood him." A distant rumble echoed across the valley. Not thunder, engines, dozens of them. Massimo glanced toward the entrance. So predictable. The iron gates exploded inward. Black SUVs surged through the smoke. Gunfire erupted. Chaos consumed the estate. Men scattered behind stone walls as bullets shattered windows and ricocheted across the courtyard. At the front of the convoy, Luca Romano stepped from his vehicle. Rain soaked his black suit within seconds. He carried no umbrella, no hesitation, only a pistol in one hand. His gray eyes never left Olivia. Massimo laughed loudly. "I knew you'd come," Luca answered in the same calm voice that had terrified Chicago for years. "I'm here." Massimo slowly raised his own weapon. "Drop yours." Luca did. The pistol hit the wet stone with a metallic clang. Every guard around him froze in disbelief. Their feared leader had surrendered his weapon. For one reason. One woman. Massimo looked delighted. There he is. The man everyone said didn't exist. The man with a weakness. Luca took another step. "You wanted me. You have me. Let her go." Massimo shook his head. "No, I want you to understand something first." He turned toward Olivia. "Do you know why he never married?" She remained silent. "Because every marriage in our world creates an alliance." Massimo's smile faded. "But if Luca marries you, he destroys every alliance I've spent decades building." He looked back at Luca. "So tell me, is she really worth an empire?" Rain dripped from Luca's hair onto the stone beneath his feet. His answer came without hesitation. "Yes." The courtyard fell silent. Even the gunfire beyond the walls seemed to disappear. Massimo stared at him. "You'd sacrifice everything?" "I already have." Those words changed everything. Massimo realized he had already lost. Not because of money, not because of power, because Luca Romano had finally become a man with something to live for. Massimo pulled the trigger. Time seemed to stop. Before anyone else could move, Olivia threw herself sideways, twisting against the ropes. The shot missed her shoulder by inches. At the exact same instant, Enzo's sniper fired from the rooftop. Massimo staggered backward, dropping his weapon. The battle ended almost as quickly as it had begun. Within minutes, the remaining DeSantis soldiers lowered their guns. Their leader had fallen. The war was over. Luca crossed the courtyard without looking at anyone else. He reached Olivia. His hands, which had never trembled in battle, shook slightly as he untied the ropes around her wrists. She looked up at him. "You came. I said I would. You could have died. I know." She gently touched the scar where she had stitched his shoulder only days earlier. "You keep getting hurt. So do you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain softened. The world around them seemed to disappear. Finally, Olivia smiled through tears. "Can I ask you something? Anything." "Why me?" Luca looked toward Midnight, who had wandered safely into the courtyard after the fighting ended. The magnificent black stallion stopped beside Olivia and lowered his head against her shoulder, exactly as he had years before. Luca smiled for the first time without restraint. 7 years ago, everyone around me saw a priceless horse. You saw a life that needed saving. You never asked who owned him. You never asked what he was worth. You simply refused to let him die. He stepped closer. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from me." His voice grew quieter. "You were the first person who ever gave without asking for anything in return." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I never thought anyone remembered. I never forgot." He reached into his coat. Instead of a weapon, he removed a small velvet box, the same ring that had been carried through gunfire, rain, and betrayal. He knelt on one knee. Every soldier friend and former enemy alike watched in stunned silence. "Olivia Carter, my world was built on fear. You taught me it could also be built on trust. I don't promise you an easy life. I don't promise there will never be danger. But I promise this: no matter how many wars I have to fight, you will never fight them alone." He opened the box. The diamond caught the first hint of sunrise, breaking through the clouds. "Will you marry me?" Olivia laughed through her tears. "You know, you're terrible at giving normal proposals." A faint smile crossed Luca's face. "I've never been a normal man." She slipped her hand into his. "No, you've always been the right one." "Yes." The ring settled onto her finger. Behind them, the storm finally broke. Golden morning light spread across the estate. Midnight galloped freely through the open field. For the first time in years, Luca Romano watched the sunrise without thinking about enemies, alliances, or revenge. Only her. Epilogue. 1 year later, the Ashwood Veterinary Center reopened under a new name, the Carter Romano Equine Rescue Foundation. Every injured horse received treatment free of charge. No cameras announced the donations. No newspapers reported them. That was exactly how Olivia wanted it. Chicago still feared Luca Romano. Rivals still whispered his name. But those closest to him noticed something had changed. Whenever meetings ran late, he left on time. Whenever storms rolled in, he called home. Whenever Midnight disappeared from the stable, everyone knew exactly where to look. He would be standing beside Olivia in the pasture, watching her laugh as the great black stallion nudged her shoulder for treats. One quiet evening, Enzo walked onto the porch, carrying a folder. "There are still families who want revenge." Luca nodded. "There always will be." Enzo looked toward Olivia through the window. Was it worth it? Luca didn't answer immediately. Inside, Olivia looked up from a rescued foal and smiled at him. The loneliness that had haunted him for decades was gone. He returned her smile. Then he looked back at Enzo. Every war I ever won gave me power. He glanced toward the woman waiting inside. But she gave me a reason to come home. Outside, the last light of day faded across the fields. Inside, for the first time in his life, the most feared mafia boss in America finally understood what peace felt like.